Yo, what is up, guys? It is your boy Blade Slayer Taylor here, and today we're going to be talking about how to grow the esports scene in Rocket League. Let's get into it.
Slayer right on top of...
Alright, so from the last video, we talked about how Rocket League is dying and how esports is basically the last hope for the Rocket League to stay afloat, right? But we're going to talk about how to kind of save not only Rocket League, but just mainly the Rocket League esports scene, in my opinion, or at least one of the ways that we can make this such a stronger format, in my opinion. So right now, if you don't know, Rocket League, or at least RLCS, is taking the format of like a season-based circuit, which I love, but what it is 3 splits leading to a world championship. You got fall, winter, and spring. Each of those splits have 3 individual regionals, which are, individual events per region, to basically earn points for that split in hopes to try and qualify for the major, which is an in-person LAN to compete against other regions besides your own. And, of course, throughout the whole season, with all 3 splits combined, you earn points. Obviously, the better you place in each tournament, you will receive more points. The teams with the most points come the end of the season will be invited to the World Championship. Honestly, it's a very good system. The only thing there are some flaws without a doubt, but one thing that seems to be very, very, very flawed with this whole circuit is the lack of really support for the bubble scene or the amateur scene. Obviously, your top pros are rewarded to be continuously invited back to regionals with their points. They're also given, very consistent money, consistent opportunities to prove themselves, right? And even honestly, even consistent opportunities to compete at LAN or at, at a main stage or in person against international competition. But with those bubble teams or those amateur teams, they can't really squeak into the top 8. And even further down, right, there's just no support, from the top like 48 teams to the top 16. It's tough, the top 12 even. And some people may say, oh, it's much better than the league play format that used to happen because, there's more chances to prove yourself as a bubble player. And I agree 1000% with the as many qualifiers as there are. I agree. There are a lot more opportunities, but even with said opportunities, even if you do make a regional, you don't gain much credibility. Sure, it's a very good accomplishment and feat, and I'm not trying to take that away from any of the players, but think about it. If we go back to league play, back in the earlier seasons, even if a team got absolutely smacked all league play long, and they got last place, you probably still remembered those players' names and the team name. But nowadays, if you see a team that goes 0-3 in groups or whatever, you remember those players. If you're a diehard Rocket League fan, maybe. But if you're just a casual viewer rooting for one of the top teams, you're probably like, who are these guys? Or like, don't care enough to remember. And that's just how it is. There's not enough value when you make it into the regionals. And of course, if you're just barely making it into the regionals, you're not going to make a major where there's even more eyes. So that's where the system is flawed, and you just don't get enough recognition unless you're a top team, in my opinion. And honestly, I think there's a really strong way to change that without changing much. And in my opinion, we can keep the same format, 3 splits, all leading up to a world championship, right? You can even include the regionals, but here's what I would change to it. Hear me out. We still keep the 3 regional format, sure. We have open qualifiers and the closed qualifiers into making the main regional, right? That all stays the same. We keep the point system. That all stays the same. Hell, even the amount of spots we give and pay teams to come out to majors and secure major spots, that stays the same. Maybe we change it to add SSA and maybe more Middle Eastern spots and stuff like that, maybe grow. But we don't need to pay for a bunch. Just pay for the top teams from each region. Just keep it similar or the same. But where I think we can really grow, and what would give opportunities to not only the fans, the players, and organizations, is, like I said, keep all those same aspects the same, right? But let's say you're a team that just was outside of that area, or even just any team that, you know, was competing and is at a very competitive level, but nowhere near, or maybe not, you know, able to place top 5 in your region to make a major. What I would suggest and change, and it goes back to similar how DreamHack worked, was you've got the invited teams and then you've got the open bracket. So with the teams that qualified for these majors, right, you still got your 5 North American, 5 North American, 5 European. You've got the 2 South American, 2 Oceania, 1 Middle Eastern, and 1 APAC. And then, like I said, we can up those numbers if we want to include, you know, more teams from better regions, right, like Middle East and stuff like that. Psyonix/Epic pays for all those teams' accommodations. That's 16 teams, right? So let's do 5 groups of 4, or my bad, no, 4 groups of 5. And you're like, oh, 4 groups of 5, that's 20 teams, but there's only 16 invited. Exactly. What I mean by that is you have Psyonix pay for this major like they would any other major. You know, they invite these top 16 teams out based on how they perform and how everyone performs in those regionals in the split, right? But we also have an open bracket, similar back to the Call of Duty and Halo days, back when they thrived. You have the invited teams; they're already paid for. They're given their opportunities in the, you know, the pro play pool, you know, the pro pool play, or the pro play, you know, bracket. And then you have an open bracket where basically you charge like $200 to $300 fee for the team to have a team pass. You don't cover any of their hotel, any of their stay. They have to find their own accommodations, their own, you know, things. They come play in an open brackets, double elimination. You know, you have a whole side station set up. The top 4 teams through this open bracket make it into those 4 groups to continue to play, or to, you know, punch their ticket into playing with all these pro teams or invited teams. And it creates this opportunity for all these amateur teams and bubble teams to not only get LAN experience, but it brings an opportunity for upsets, and it brings an opportunity for fans to learn new players, and there's more stakes, more value to it, right? All while keeping your budget pretty much the same. The only initial budget that might cost more is the amount of setups you may need to run the side stations, but it doesn't need to be broadcast, it doesn't need to be on main stage, none of that. Just enough to get an open bracket with, you know, proper equipment and gaming setups for these teams to run through a single or double elimination bracket, preferably double, to try and get that top 4 teams. And then bam, they make their way into the pro play area where they can continue to battle out with the teams that were already invited and have all their stuff paid for. And this does a couple of good things. One, brings more people to your venue and to your major. There's going to be more money to be made, right? Those people are basically, let's say you make the money, you use that money towards, you know, the initial cost or whatever to, you know, pay for the setups, you know, on the side station. Eventually you'll make your money back within a year, without a doubt. But more importantly, you're also bringing in more viewers and more people, because now you're creating storylines within the open bracket that transition into the main bracket. We all know Rocket League is filled with upsets, so who doesn't want to watch the potential amazing journey of a team from the open bracket come all the way through, make it to the pro play area where they, you know, advance to the top 20 and get to play with all the pro teams that got invited to the major, and give their best shot at giving these teams run for their money. And some of you might be like, oh, if they can't beat them online, why should they be given a shot at a major? At majors and LAN events, it's a completely different beast. There's definitely a massive advantage for the competitive players online, in my opinion, but in a LAN environment, sure, the pro players and experienced players may have more experience and maybe the potential advantage, but at the same time, the open bracket team has absolutely no expectations, and they get to play and create an amazing experience. They have every reason to succeed in that environment, and if they don't, they have a great experience to build on top of heading into the next split. This gives players more reason to continue playing, because there's more opportunities not only to compete but also to make a name for themselves and to get experience traveling the world while also competing, all on their own dime. Or where I loop this in, there's a lot of organizations that aren't willing to pay 5 to 6 digit contracts for these pro players just because they're an amateur org, right? They're not able, but they still have money to spend. They have money to throw. I've known so many organizations that want to get into Rocket League, but there's no room for them because, obviously the top of the top, they're paying lots of money. And they don't have that kind of money, but they aren't an org where they don't have money. They have enough money to spend to send teams and players to LANs, to pay them smaller salaries. And this is where those organizations come in and pay those bubble teams and amateur teams to compete for their team and their organization. They pay for their flights, their hotels. They get their name out there, and that chance for them to be competing against these top 16 teams in the world at a major if they make it through the open bracket. And then now, not only that, you have more organizations involved. You have more fans involved because now you're bringing in an extra layer of support. You have more people that are going to, just within those organizations that are going to come to the events, document it, hopefully make content out of it. They're going to support their team. They're going to enjoy the event. Now you've opened it to so many more people, opened it to so many more organizations, so many more players, so many more storylines. And it's just, to me, it's just a no-brainer. Obviously, there's certain calculations that you have to do. But at the end of the day, this really brings the most out of it, in my opinion. You bring the top of the top out to your event, so you still have the best of the best competition. You bring in the amateur and bubble scene, so you bring in so much more eyes. You bring in, like I said, so much more. It's so perfect, and it's so amazing to me how great of a format this is and was, especially if you go back to the early Call of Duty days, the early Halo days back in MLG. They did such a wonderful job of doing this and incorporating the pro play mixed in with the potential upsets from these open bracket teams, and it truly keeps the value in everything. It makes regionals important because you want to be that team that gets flown out. You want to be the team that gets accommodated by Psyonix. You want to make a name for yourself, be the top of the top, right? That doesn't change. You don't lose integrity. You still want to get everything paid for by your org, and you want to have that satisfaction of being the top and being invited out on your own merit rather than having to rely on an organization and rely on whatnot to cover your travel. But not only that, you're obviously still working towards pro points to make it to the Worlds event as well. Not only just that major, but Worlds, because Worlds is more important. And at the end of the day, if we want one event that's just invite only, there's no open bracket, make that Worlds. Worlds can be invite only, and that's where all the points matter. But for the majors, man, we got to open up this opportunity for the amateur scene and the bubble scene to get an opportunity to play. Because even if they don't make it through, maybe they don't make a run, they don't even make it past the open bracket, it builds an experience, and it gives these players a reason to stay in the scene longer, because a lot of them don't make enough money to live off of it. So for them, they're not being able to go to LANs, and they're not being able to make enough money to sustain living. So there's no reason for them to continue. They just quit. Whereas if you give these players this opportunity, maybe they don't have enough money to live off of it for a long time or even live off of it right away, but they'll make ends meet because some people have the passion and desire just to compete at these massive LANs and to get the opportunity to try and push. And not just that, to get to travel and compete and see the world, right? If they're going to a European LAN and they've never been to Europe, that's traveling right there. That's an experience that they'll never forget, whether they do well or not in the event. Like, there's so much to this where there's so much more value that there is in the community if they bring this. And if they bring this, the whole community will expand. There'll be more eyes on it. There'll be just it'll just be so many more plus sides to this community. And the only thing that Psyonix or the Rocket League esports team would have to basically account for or pay maybe more for is maybe a little bit more staff to regulate the open bracket and the initial cost or budget just to get enough PCs and monitors to set up the side station for the open bracket, so that there's a lot of extra setups for that to go on. As far as prize pool, there doesn't have to be a prize pool for the open bracket itself, just as long as you maybe pay for the prize pool for the top 16 or the top 20, so that they make it out of groups. They get to make a big name for themselves, and then they make a little change outside of that. Believe me, a lot of the players, obviously they're money hungry and they want to make it a living out of it, but for a lot of them at the same time, it's also about building a name for themselves and getting the opportunity to get that recognition so that they can make that next step forward. And this is just one of those ways that we can grow the community. And I know the esports team has been looking for something like this. I don't know if they've thought about this. I'm sure they had to have. If not, now you know. But hopefully, you know, like I said, maybe I'm forgetting something here, but I've talked to very many people about this whole setup and strategy behind, you know, potential formats for next year, and I haven't really talked to anybody that said that it's a bad idea or that they really would want to change anything to the format that I just suggested. And like I said, the only additional cost that Sonics would have to put forth is the setups, and maybe some additional, you know, admins or moderators just to make sure that everything runs smoothly on the open bracket side. But like I said, prize pool doesn't have to be upped. You don't have to pay for any more accommodation, whether it be travel, flights, hotel, rather than, you know, what you already are paying for these majors. And all you're doing is, in my opinion, bringing in more eyes, which again leads to more revenue, and it just grows the esports scene. And it's so possible. That's how Call of Duty grew. Hell, honestly, I think that's why the Rocket League esports scene grew back in 2017 with all the DreamHack events. It brings a whole new layer of eyes and storylines. Look at the Muffin Men. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't feel like I have to say this, or I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I have to. Just put it out there because it makes so much sense to me. It's so common sense, but it just doesn't happen. So I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I hope it happens. I hope someone sees this that can actually maybe push this idea, or, you know, at least elaborate why it's not happening. But at the end of the day, that I just wanted to put that out there. Let me know what you guys think. If you agree with my idea and my strategy behind the potential circuit next year and adding the opportunity for amateur players to play on LAN, or if you think this idea is not as good, or maybe drop your own ideas down below if you have any other different ones. But this has been your boy Blaze Slayer Taylor. Much love to you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.